Have you ever imagined a world, well, fill in the blank. SparkHub is about making dreams happen when life throws major curveballs at you. It's my hope that any time you listen to an episode, something will spark inside of you, and even if no one listens, but I leave some kind of legacy time capsule behind for my children that may even spark them to imagine their own great world after I'm gone, well, that's good enough for me. Below each episode are crucial show notes, and please support us by visiting thesparkhub.com. Now, let's begin. My name is Alan, and I have a heck of a story for you. The theme of this episode is probably incredible serendipity, maybe looking for signs, even biblical ones, and hope. So imagine this. I was very depressed around my 48th birthday, as it was the second birthday I'd be marking as a divorced father of two who was still living as a family under one roof, and at the time I record this, we still are. So stress, uncertainty, sapped energy. My birthday's in January, so the British weather wasn't very nice, and I was feeling very lonely, and all of this was compounding. But then some good friends who have been helping me out offered a trip to Seville, Spain, to help lift my spirits, and theirs as well. Now, I'm not very religious, but my friends' names are Paul and Peter, and while we were waiting to board the plane, we met a lone traveler named John. Peter, Paul, John, all very biblical names, and as it turned out, John and I actually had a lot in common in terms of dealing with our own divorces. We both have 2 children, as well as coming from the same continent. Now, we actually thought we'd never see John again. We said goodbye to him once we landed, and then by pure chance, that night while we were out, we bumped into him in downtown Seville. We became a group of 4 men, all supporting each other through tough times in the calles of Seville, enjoying the weather, and really just trying to find laughter again. And we found lots of it. Now, it continues. Peter, Paul, and I reconnected with John in the UK, and recently he came to visit me at my house. We took a long walk in nature to admire the blooming bright rapeseed that's bright yellow, as well as the gorgeous bluebells that come out in spring, and they're only around for about a week or 2. And while we were walking, I decided to interview John in the forest for SparkHub, because I think our story is valuable. And if you look at the show notes below, you'll be able to see the pictures of where we were. So without further ado, here's my conversation with John, which started with some serendipity in Seville. All right, hello.
Hello.
All right, John, my first question for you is, what made you speak to Paul in line getting on a plane to go to Seville?
Yeah. So he had a cool bag, right? So I don't know, we were standing there. I think the line was queued for a little while, right?
Yeah, we were backed up.
Yeah, we were standing there for a good, at least 20 minutes, I think. I don't know, maybe I was just awkward silence, so I just wanted to start a conversation with somebody. But yeah, he had a cool bag, and so it was just...
So you asked him about his bag, I remember, and then he swiveled around and said, "Hey, Alan, we met another American."
yeah.
Which was fine, and then we all talked. But it was funny, because for me, it's like, my 2 friends' names are Paul and Peter, and then we met John.
Yeah.
So it was all very biblical.
Yeah.
And then, we chatted a bit more and found out we all had something in common, didn't we?
Exactly.
All 4 of us were either going through a divorce or about to. And you were going to Seville, like us, just to get away for a weekend, eh?
Yeah, I think that's how the conversation got started. It was, asking about the bag, and then Paul, you guys were like, "Are you just going on a trip by yourself?" Because I was probably the only person in line sitting by myself.
That's true.
And we just started talking, like, I just started going through a recent divorce, and you're like, "Oh yeah, hey Alan, look, another guy,"
There's many of us, it seems.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you asked about the bag, because what was crazy was obviously we chatted and said goodbye, and then literally serendipity.
Yeah.
You were just wandering the streets of Seville, and the 3 of us just walked out of a bar, and we spent 2 days together. So and it was therapeutic.
It was. We seemed to kick it off really well in the airport, and I remember walking away from the airport thinking, man, I should have at least given my number, gotten their number, because the conversation went well for a good 20 minutes. And I remember I was like, man, what a bummer. They seemed like a cool group of guys. And then when we ran into each other in the street, it just seemed like, one of those
fate.
It was meant to happen kind of things.
Yeah, that's why I call it like the serendipity of Seville.
Yeah.
I call it that. But yeah, I was glad we bumped into you again, man, because my memory of the next sort of 48 hours was, man, we just had so much to talk about. And I think Well, another question for you is why did you move to the UK? So obviously you're from America, I'm from Canada, but we both somehow ended up over here.
Yeah.
But what's your story to the UK? Why did you guys come over?
Yeah. So my story just job related. Yeah, just picked up a position here to have the opportunity to move to England with my job. Yeah, so coming over here to the UK, it was really exciting because it was going to give the kids a unique opportunity to live overseas, and not many of us have the opportunity to live in another country.
Yeah.
And be exposed. The cool thing about coming from America to the UK, there's a good relationship there, but there's also a lot of familiarity, but it's different enough to where you get to learn different perspectives, speak the same language. We have a lot of the same interests. So like I said, there's some familiarity there. So it's not too different for the kids and the family.
It's not jarring like you're living in China or something.
No,
and
exactly.
Nobody speaks the language.
No.
I mean, it's interesting because when I was a kid, I was about 3 years old, and I was, grew up in Montreal, not far from where you're from. You're from Chicago, so just over the Great Lakes.
Mm-hmm.
But my parents took us to Korea for 2 years when I was a kid.
Oh, wow.
And I have memories of it, even though I was really young. My brother had just been born. And, that's a big culture shock because they don't speak the language. It's totally different. But we were living amongst it was a Canadian compound. So we had like our own suburb. And I have, vivid memories of it. And then we sort of flew back to Canada. And I've always wanted to do the same for my kids and, take them overseas. So it sounded like opportunity knocked. And you were like, let's go. And then I know you're saying there's a lot of familiarity. But did you find, I mean, I've been here since 2006. You've been here a lot less time. But do you still find cultural gaps?
Little nuances. Yeah. The funny thing is I have a close friend, and it's just funny when you have to explain little nuances, like with either jokes or it usually has to do with like the language, and we always have a really good laugh about that. But I find it interesting. I think it adds another layer of some depth to, sometimes your relationships, like if you have a friendship and you're just able to laugh about certain things that you wouldn't. Yeah.
As long as you can read each other's body language. My biggest thing now, obviously we're in different lines of work, but for the past few years I've been an entrepreneur. But what I'm finding is like America and to a degree Canada have a very entrepreneurial. It's kind of like who was saying the other day, like in America and Canada is hope and abundance. It's kind of that's the brand. It's like you can be anything you want. You work hard enough, you can be anything you want. Yeah. And I think it was true for my dad's generation because he came from the UK to Canada and life was good. But coming the other way, I found everything was 3 times as small and 3 times as expensive.
That's true. That's the truth.
And it's not so much hope and abundance. It's more stoic. And economically, the UK, it's a great economy, but it's nowhere near the ambition of some of the North American markets. But it's swings and roundabouts, as they say, right? Yeah. There's so much here to celebrate. There's so much here that's cool and interesting. They don't have mall culture. They don't have, there's shop culture. There's high street culture. There's Bluebell Woods. There's all this great stuff that we don't have. But then I also sometimes find I was caught between 2 worlds because I am this person who's generally likes my space. Yeah. And in the UK, it comes at a premium, to live well.
What I was most excited about, I'm a huge history nerd. So when I came over here, seeing a church that's been there for 900 years, I get pretty excited about a village church, which is kind of funny, and I'm sure the folks who live around here are just like, yeah, that's the local church, like whatever. But I'm fascinated by the rich history here and that there's so much.
And it's palpable. It's just everywhere.
It is. You just the other night in Ely, just able to walk up and touch a 900-year-old cathedral where 900 years ago a man was making his living in forming that stone and placing it, and
that's new.
Right. And that's just to me. There's having that tangible connection with the past is just something that I have not been able to.
You're telling me there's no malls in Illinois that you can do that in? I hear you. It's tough. It's you kind of want the best of both worlds because it is tough to live an American lifestyle. In the UK, but sometimes less is more, right? Yeah. And you've got that history next door.
I totally nerded out on you there.
That's okay. That's what it's about, and I agree. I love the history of the place too. But sometimes, but the thing is, you married an American and came to the UK. I married a Brit. Yeah. So I was marrying into the local culture, and I can say, sometimes the cultural misunderstandings are funny, and you can laugh about it, and sometimes they can divide. Over time, they can, they can stack up. So I guess for me, I always thought I was going to come here for a couple of years and move on. Then I met and married someone, and then life, kids, mortgage, all of that. You obviously had that going on, and then you came to the UK. But it sounds like, well, we've talked about it. You know, you've gone through a divorce with 2 kids as well. And what were the kind of steps leading up to that? Did you see it coming? Did you not see it coming? Was it out of the blue? And sort of how did it hit you?
I think the signs were there over the years. I think I assumed that we would just work through them, or that they would. It's hard to explain, but I would say, yes, it happened over the course of years. And looking back, maybe I didn't take those warning signs seriously enough.
Yeah.
To where I, like, okay, hey, this is. I mean, we tried therapy over a course of a couple of years, and that was not enough. So we did that. But yeah, I would say it didn't happen abruptly. So when it did finally happen, I guess it was a little, I don't want to say easier to accept, but
the writing was on the wall.
Yeah, you could tell that neither of us were in a healthy place. And this probably, as difficult and unfortunate as it is, probably is a step in the right direction.
And your kids were how old when you had to have that?
9 and 6.
It's rough, eh?
Very rough, yeah.
It's interesting because I was listening to a lot of men that I speak to, and someone said it's like, if, I mean, you maybe work in the field, but if you think about a plane flying, a pilot has to reconfigure the destination every 1 minute. And if you're off by even a degree, you'll miss your destination by a large margin. And I think that happened, you know, as happened to you, same happened to me, same seems to be happening to a lot of guys. Is, you know, we think there's a number of steps before the nuclear option, and especially with kids, you don't want to break your family up. But is it better? You know, I'm certainly not going to advocate for either side, but that's what I went through. I suddenly went, man, we're way off course here.
Yeah.
And can you course correct? That's, I guess, what you went through. It was like therapy is one way to try and, right, let's realign the destination. But let's be honest, man, I think the past couple of years, it's just macro circumstances have not been easy. You know, I think COVID was brutal. I don't know what it was like for you, but, you know, you work hard. You come home, you're tired, the wife's tired, the kids are tired. There's now a lot more screen time in kids' lives. It's just not like it used to be. I mean, I don't know about you, but I was a latchkey kid. My parents didn't know where I was most of the time, but I was out on a bike in the woods. I was somewhere. Nowadays, it just seems like we're constantly connected. And for example, you know, even if you leave to go to work, you're still texting constantly and social media and that. And I just found that, you know, is a lot. And then especially for me, I don't know what your case was, but I worked from home a lot. And so I was literally never leaving the house, and then COVID hit, and that locked us all down. And then, so all I'll say is I think there's a lot of mitigating circumstances that you went through, just like I did, and I didn't see the writing on the wall. Right. I mean, I kind of did, like you, but I thought, oh, there's ways we can recourse correct. There's ways we can get back. There's way, you know, the kids come first. And sadly, from my perspective, it just for me came out of nowhere, and then suddenly you're in a. Well, I'll let you describe. What was the state of mind that you went into the minute you knew this was going to happen?
Oh, I think that initial shock, it was almost like a panic. I remember being in work and just not being able to think about anything else. But even though the writing was on the wall and it was this slow decline over time, when that decision actually came, it was still a shock to the system.
Of course.
It's like, okay, the last 15 years of my life it's about to change dramatically. Or the course that I thought I was on, at least that my perspective was the marriage was on a slow decline, but now it's just completely going in a direction that I did not anticipate. So it was very unnerving, unsettling. So
how did it manifest mentally and physically on you? What did you have?
That's a really good question. Looking back on it now, I think you can't help but it to seep in every aspect of your life when you're going through, and it is traumatic, right? They say,
well, it's PTSD level, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think the only thing that can compare is death. At least I've heard it described that way.
I would agree. Well, I literally, you know, I had a tragedy in my life where I lost my brother, and that was very scarring. And I'd say this is right up next to that. Yeah, it's absolutely brutal. And so go on. How did it manifest in terms of?
Well, it's hard to focus at work, of course, and then my ex and I were in a position where, being overseas, we still had to live with each other for a good 6 to 8 months. I might have been even longer after the initial decision, and then when she was able to move back. So we still had to live with each other, and that was extremely stressful because at work you're thinking about it, and then you go home, and then you're right back in the middle of the storm, right?
Yeah.
So I don't.
And there's no break. And I
No,
think
that's exactly.
there's no sanctuary.
Yeah. How about you?
The same, exactly the same. So I mean, I'm at the present time we're recording this, I'm still living under the same roof. We haven't sold our house yet. It's been 9 months since we've listed the house. Nothing shifting. I have no idea what the timeline is. No idea how much money we'll get for the place, and it's purgatory. I take comfort in the fact that we're still friendly.
Yeah.
And there are moments of tension, and of course the kids, I worry about them the most. Like, what's it like to be living in that way? But we try to balance it out. Now we both step away. We both go out, and I'm very supportive of that. We're not always under the same roof. We're working very hard, so that's tough. And I think, just to follow up on something you said, if I rewind the tape to pre-divorce to when I thought things were fine, I used to commute to London all the time. So I had the opposite problem. I went from never being home to being home all the time. And what I found difficult was I'd get on the train if I was lucky, because it'd be rammed or there'd be like a cancellation or whatever. And if I was lucky enough to get a seat, I'd sit down and I'd write notes about what I wanted to tell my wife when I got home, just to get how were the kids, how the kids, hear what her day was, but then also talk about my day. Oh, this happened in this meeting, whatever, just to try and keep that connection. So we had some connective tissue, because it couldn't just be work, kids, bed, repeat, but it turned into that. And I found that I kept saying, oh, it'll get better, we'll have a weekend away or whatever. But the weekends, we just really had to catch up on life admin, like the house is dirty and you've got to cut the grass. And, you want to live in a nice big house with lots of space, but that admin comes with it, right? You know how it is. And so you come home and I empathize with women who take on the mother load, because I'm very empathetic towards it. I come home and I look around, I go, oh, I'll take care of it. This stuff, laundry, whatever, I'll take care of it. But one night I remember, this is particularly symbolic, and I don't know if this happened to you. One night I came home, I screamed home on the train. It was my commute's about an hour, give or take, door to door. So it's 2 hours of commuting a day. Sometimes, like I said, miss a train, I'd miss bath time, or I'd just squeak in the door in time for bedtime and get the kids to bed. And then if we were lucky, 1 or 2 nights out of 7, we'd fall asleep on the couch watching Netflix, and that was kind of the routine. And I kept thinking, oh, it'll change. I'll get older, we'll get better. But I remember one time coming home and just sitting and looking at my backyard and just looking at a tree, watching it move, and go, wow, I'm so lucky. I'm so privileged. I had all my notes from the train. And then my ex came downstairs and she was just burnt out from her day. And literally we just had an argument. And it seemed to be, and again, I'm not blaming anyone, but it's like 2 people in tinder boxes.
Yes.
And I felt that's what our routine became. And I just kept thinking it would change, it would get better. I had hope that we'd go out, we'd do more, but then money, right? And once you've paid for your lifestyle and how much is left in the pot to go do stuff, there's money. So you get into that kind of, I don't know, it's like being underwater, but you can't quite break through the surface. And that just repeats and repeats and repeats. And so similar to you, I had lots of moments like that, but I'm an optimist. And I think it just wore us down and broke us down. Whether or not, there's probably core issues, cultural differences, as you say, that the writing was on the wall years ago, even just personality types, different adventures that we wanted to do, not always together. And then you eventually go, man, you don't see it coming, but like you say, you suddenly go, I went into shock. So to come back to your question, how did I manifest it? Man, I didn't eat for a couple of days. I didn't sleep for a couple of days. I was just, it felt like I was on coffee the whole time. I just I couldn't understand what I was doing. I kept thinking there was a way back, we could reset, or maybe we could, but no, it was done. And then it got down to practicalities. And I did a previous podcast on sort of 3 stages. There's the emotional stage, which is the worst. And then you got to look at finances. Then you got to look at legals. And that's unfortunately what divorce boils down to. And the hardest part I find about divorce is you have to take your life and put it in a spreadsheet. Or you have to take your life, everything you've done, and you have to put numbers to it. So you're baking down the 15 or 16 years of memories and going, what's that worth, and what's that worth, and what's that worth? Because the next step is you have to decide how to carve it up. And once you're going through the emotional strain and you're living with someone and you're still trying to work all this shit out and you're trying to make the kids happy, it's brutal, man. It's tough. It sounds like you went through similar and you come out the other side. So I suppose the way it was described to me by someone who you met in Seville, one of my friends, he went through it and he said it's like a J curve. You're sliding down the J and you're going to hit the bottom, but then you start to come back up. And all my friends who were a couple of years out of their divorces, even with kids, have said it's much better. They're friends with their exes now. They can, they've got a good routine, and so that it kind of gives you hope. So I guess the question for you is, are you still amicable with your ex as you're working through these steps?
I am. I don't know if I would say it's a good relationship, but it's definitely
could be worse.
Yeah, it could be a lot worse. So we do keep in regular contact every day through social media, whether it's about the kids or even if it's sharing a little bit of what's going on in our lives. So yeah, we haven't severed ties. I would say it's healthier now than it was before.
Because you have distance?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say I remember the day after she left, we talked a little bit about, that initial shock when we made that decision. But when she left, it was really hard because she took the kids with her. That part was devastating. But at the same time, I remember that same day, it felt like a bag of bricks that had just been taken off my shoulders. The stress that just seemed to melt away when I was able to just take time and pull away for myself.
And have some perspective.
Some perspective. And I would say, yes, we get along, which is good, but I think our relationship is a little healthier because we just got to the point where we couldn't live with each other.
Yeah.
We can be friends. I think that's where you want to be. You want to be able to get along with them, but sometimes just living together is no longer.
Well, it's not healthy, like you say. It's sapping. I describe it as kryptonite, and that's not a reflection on anyone. It's just that's what it's like. And so yeah, it sounds like you're negotiating all this stuff from afar. It's difficult, but the one thing you do have is perspective, I guess. And
yeah,
I suppose one question to you is: do you feel it's better to have loved and lost than never have to loved at all, or would you rather never have known?
No, that's a good question. The way I look at my relationship now, I don't see it as like 15 years lost at all. So I'm grateful for the memories that we've created together. When I look back, and sometimes it's easy to slip into these fantasies of the past and
the rose-colored glasses, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I really wish that we were back in this vacation or that vacation, and that was so beautiful. But every day wasn't like that. But I cherish those memories. I cherish the memories of us having children together, our Christmas mornings. Yeah, we're not going to be able to share those in the future, but there are beautiful memories, and it enriched both of our lives. Unfortunately, it wasn't for the long term like we had hoped for.
Well, nobody gets married to get divorced.
Exactly.
I committed for life, and
yeah, I would never say that. I wish I hadn't loved and married, and this is a difficult period of my life. I'm going to get through it. But I had some really beautiful memories, and I have some beautiful children. So yes, it's definitely to have loved and lost than to not have loved at all.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know what it's going to look like in the future. I am very scared of dating now. I feel like I've atrophied it. I certainly don't ever want to get into swipe left, swipe right dating. It just seems to be a game, which I don't want to play. But we'll see. I think, I suppose my next question to you, and it'll come back to me, I'm sure, is what did you lean on to cope, aside from meeting people, going on a trip to Seville? What were your daily practices or things that you had to, friendships and stuff that you had to lean into to stay sane?
I'd say holistic health. So mind, body, spirit, making sure that you're taken care of. You have to stay physically healthy, right? I think in challenges in the past, I just assumed that if I went to the gym all the time and I focused on my physical health, that it was going to translate into just being a healthy person.
By osmosis.
Right? Yeah, exactly. But I think in this stage of my life, I recognize that, hey, I probably need to see a therapist. And that was something I really leaned heavily upon every week. There were some weeks when I just couldn't wait to talk to that person, to my therapist, and just get a different perspective.
Just to release?
And get a different perspective from a professional, because it's healthy to have buddies that you can talk things through, but then to also have a professional perspective with somebody who has probably spoken with hundreds and hundreds of couples and individuals about very similar situations, and we offer, hey, what do you think about this? Or just really offer insight that you probably aren't going to get anywhere else. I would say it's worth its weight in gold. I use an online app, so I was able to do video calls once a week, and I really leaned heavily on that. So I would say between taking care of my physical health, talking to a mental health professional, also journaling was absolutely invaluable. Just being able to write and think about on a day to day, this is what was going through my mind. This is kind of how I was thinking about it. And I would always cap it off at the end with, all right, this is my next step. This is how I need to navigate, at least how I perceived it at that time. That was absolutely important too. And then, of course, like you said, you alluded to friendships and relationships. And I have to give a shout out to my dog because Baxter, my spaniel, he's part of that support system.
Dogs are, what is it, man's best friend?
Absolutely.
So.
And then one of my goals coming out of the relationship was to get out there and meet new people, live life again, not be caught up in my routine of going to work, going home, and sitting there in front of the TV. I wanted to get out and see people, see places. And the Seville story is part of that tapestry of getting to know people. And, hey, sometimes it just requires a simple question of, where'd you get that bag? And you never know what that's going to turn into or how that's going to blossom.
Well, would you imagine asking that question, that you'd be sitting in a field of bluebells with a little white dog doing a podcast?
Yeah, and that's where we are right now. We're in a rural England in a bluebell field, and because we just wanted to take your dog out for a walk, and here we are. Yeah, and it was just 2 months later, right? 3 months later.
I think in response to that, I haven't journaled and I haven't sought therapy yet for a number of reasons, but I find sending voice notes to people helps.
Yeah.
And the guys you met me with, I often send voice notes. They send me voice notes. We now correspond a lot, and it's funny that we're doing this podcast, because if we could probably just like chop up all our voice notes. But I think in summary, it's like, hey man, you're okay. Don't give up. There's other people going through this. And I think isolation is what makes it bad, to your point, like where you're sitting in front of TVs. And I sadly lost my brother to he took his own life in 2014, but he was isolated. He was a vault. And I just think, unfortunately, the statistics today around men doing that type of stuff is horrific. And I give you a good example. When I was initially going through my divorce, I was in a very dark place, and I was sitting outside and just thinking, man, just give me a sign that things are okay. And a friend texted me, one of them who you met, and said, hey mate, are you all right? Out of the blue. It felt like there was like this signal that I sent out, and someone came and said, hey man, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I'm not. And we went to the pub, and then he listened, and he told me about the J curve, and he'd gone through it, and 3 other guys had gone through it. And then you and I met, and we chatted about it. And I just think like you say, if you put your energy back out there, you'll find that there's other people that are just looking for a conversation. It's kind of why I started SparkHub. It was be silent or talk to people, and it's just opened new doors. And like I said, you've now come to visit us a couple times, and there's a good friendship there. Who knows what's going to happen in the future, but it's just like, these are the moments that make life really worthwhile, I find. And had I not gone to Seville, not gone to the pub, there's a whole sliding doors scenario that wouldn't lead to this, but here we are. And I think there's more of that to come, and you have to remember that. Sometimes you have to stop blaming yourself. Shit goes sideways. It just happens.
Big part of that. My way of doing it is not the only way. That was my equation. But as long as I think what's important is intentionality and putting yourself out there and recognizing that sometimes you need to be uncomfortable to grow. And so sometimes putting yourself out there, being vulnerable a little bit, and being intentional to make new connections with people, it can be a little uncomfortable at first.
Well, you atrophy. I mean, when you're single, I remember being single, and I don't remember what it's like.
Yeah.
I've been married for a long time, 2 kids, and you suddenly your social circle sinks and you atrophy. But you're right, you got to get back out there. And I suppose, just to wrap this up, do you believe there's the one out there still? Do you still have hope in abundance, the North American spirit? And
I've never been one to believe that there's the perfect one out there. What I think now, coming out of a marriage, is that it requires sacrifice and intentionality in a relationship. And I don't think there's this one magical person out there for me, but I am optimistic that I'm going to meet somebody again, and that there's a person that I can spend my life with. I think, going back to your question, is it better to have loved than lost? And I'm going to take my relationship as, we have some beautiful memories, and what didn't go right, I need to learn from that. So going into my next relationship, if you don't learn from that past relationship, you're just going to make the same mistakes again.
Of course.
So yes, I am excited. I am optimistic. Absolutely. I'm excited about meeting somebody again, but I'm also excited about my own growth and applying those lessons to the next relationship.
100%.
And I know that it's going to be healthier. So I am optimistic. I'm absolutely excited about
Well,
that.
I share it with you. We still have that North American spirit, which is great. And you know, even in England, there's things can bloom because we're sitting amongst them. Thanks for coming on SparkHub, man. Really appreciate all the insights. And yeah, I've learned a lot. You know, I'm going to keep believing you can bump into someone, ask a question, and it could lead somewhere.
Yeah.
So who knows, right?
Absolutely. Well, thanks, brother. I appreciate you bringing me on here, and maybe we can do it again sometime. So.
Of course. All right. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Hal.
Thank you for listening. To support SparkHub, please have a look at the show notes below this episode or visit thesparkhub.com to sign up for our newsletter, which offers exclusive inside scoops. Just quickly, the music you're hearing is composed by Shi Hao Yan, and the audio engineering is done by Emily Chung. My name is Alan, and I hope that you dream big and something sparked in you today.